Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 2 of the Stomp Wrestling Retrospective. My name is Michael Lawrence Potter. I will be your guide through this year, the year 1993, where the mullets flowed free and tie-dye was an acceptable fashion choice. And we are here on the 18th of January, 1993. I could not do this journey alone. So over on the other side of the world, as I sit here in very rainy Wadayama, Japan, is 1/5 of Stomp Wrestling. You know him as WrestleDrop, but I know him as Ricky Ricardo. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Excited to talk about this episode. It's like a complete contrast to last week, so I'm excited for this.
Yeah, well, I think that that brings us to the first point that so basically, if you haven't watched the first episode, what are you doing? Like, you don't just like start a season at episode 2 and think, oh, okay, I'll see if I can catch up. No, go back and listen to it. Otherwise, a lot of what we're going to say is not going to make sense. Or stay. You're a human being. You're allowed to do what you want.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
basically, the ratings came back for the first episode of Raw. And now you remember in the last episode, we spoke about the fact that this was kind of not make or break, but Vince did need to make a change because the USA Network were not happy with his output at that point. So they go in, guns blazing. It's going to be raw, uncensored, uncut, uncooked. We need to make this work. Well, the ratings were a Nielsen 2.5, which is not good. Like, to give you an idea, 2.5 is what Raw was pulling in during the 2020 pandemic era, and this is in the age of streaming. This is not in the age of terrestrial television. So this was
Yeah.
a bit of a blow for Vince McMahon, and I think personally that's why the caliber of the show is so much higher. Because whoever was in charge at that time, it might have been Dick Ebersol, pulled him aside and must have been like, buddy, no, you
Did
need
you
to
did
do
you
better
see
than
what
this.
you put out on TV last week? That's probably what it
Yeah.
was like. Did you see what those people were forced to watch from your channel? Let's do something better. Let's give them some
Let,
real wrestling. That's probably what
let's
was said.
Exactly. So let's take a look at around the houses, what was happening in the world at that time. Box office and songs, nothing really changed week to week. A Few Good Men is still top of the box office chart. I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston, still at the top of the music charts. The rand at this point was 3 Rand 37 to the dollar. Good Lord, better days. And a loaf of bread in New York City would cost you about $1.29.
Okay.
This day in the news, Sierra Leone's civil war is finally declared as over. Of course, there would be a lot of skirmishes and stuff that would happen because, unfortunately, Sierra Leone is just one of those countries in Africa that there always seems to be some sort of factionalism. But the big one that's recorded in the history books, was over. And for the first time in the United States, Martin Luther King Day was celebrated in all 50 states. The article goes into a lot of reasons as to why the day was not celebrated in all 50 states, but racism. It was racism.
Yeah.
That's why it wasn't. But this is quite a historic day in which Martin Luther King was celebrated in all 50 states, which is probably why the ballroom was pretty packed because it was a public holiday and people wanted to come check out the wrestling. Now, over on the other channel, and this is the first time that I'm able to say if I had a ticket for both WCW and Raw, I don't know which one I'd pick because
Oh damn.
the WCW house show on the same day was pretty solid. Johnny B. Bad beat Scotty Flamingo, who would be the future Raven. Eric Watts beat the Barbarian, which is just wow. That is
Sounds like
just so
fun.
much nepotism. Name redacted, aka Chris Benoit, put on a stormer of a match with Two Cold Scorpio, a 20-minute draw, which I can imagine must have been insane.
Yeah.
Barry Windham defeated Dustin Rhodes. And then, let's see, Vader defended the WCW title against Ron Simmons. And then finally, in the main event, and there seems to be like a trend that WCW would put tag matches in the main event instead of the title match. But the NWA Tag Team Champions, and I completely forgot these guys ever held a team together. Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas versus the Hollywood Blondes. And yeah, Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat won
Okay.
because of a DQ. I couldn't get much information on it, but it looks like looks like Mr. Steve Austin, who would he ever be,
Yeah.
decided to take out Mr. Shane Douglas with I think it was a steel chair. And it's so interesting reading this WCW card because all I'm thinking is, okay, we're in New York right now, which would be the home of ECW quite soon.
Yeah.
And all I'm seeing is like Scotty Flamingo, Chris Benoit, Too Cold Scorpio.
That's what I was
what's it?
thinking.
Yeah, Brian Pillman, Steve
Yeah.
Austin, Shane Douglas. I'm like, wow, this is like a pretty solid ECW card.
I had to like re-guess myself. I'm like, are you actually reading out an ECW card for a moment? And I was like, no,
that
no. He said WCW. That was quite a
WCW house
yeah.
show on a Sunday. And now
Hmm.
I think usually in the early 90s it was kind of a joke to say, well, I'd rather watch WCW than WWF just because of what the content was. But now it seems that the tide is a-changing because
Yeah.
WCW is going through a bit of change of management. The glorified pizza shop manager, as he's been referred to, is on the outs, and a returning steady hand by the name of Kip Fry is assuming control, which is probably why we're having a sort of exodus of talent in the WWF, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So should we start with the beginning of the show as I crack open a fresh drink of no description
Nice.
until the sponsorship comes through?
So the show actually started off a lot more exciting, a lot more hot than it did last week. Because last week
Sure.
it was on a downer. We saw Sean Mooney, the exciting face that is Sean Mooney, the face that everyone knows that is Sean Mooney. I'm being sarcastic there. To now, this week we started off straight away with the three commentators, straight into the action. Vince McMahon calls or announces the show starting. He does his usual, "Welcome to Monday Night Raw." That's a terrible Vince what is the word I'm looking for? Accent. But anyway, then we saw Rob Bartlett actually tearing up a photo of Bobby Heenan. That's just depressing. More signs
did
that Bobby
you
Heenan
know
is
what that
gone.
was a reference to, by the way? Because you're a young man.
No.
Okay, so basically, Sinead O'Connor on Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
She was the musical guest. I think it was 2 years prior to this.
Okay.
And Sinead O'Connor, an amazing singer, but like very controversial, very steadfast. In 2024, she would be referred to as like woke. And her thing was that she wanted to hold up a picture of a starving child in Africa because she basically said, it doesn't make sense that I'm this big musician, this big star, and people are starving and dying in Africa. I want to bring attention to this on the biggest stage that I can. Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
But she swerved them right at the end because instead she was one of the first people to basically be against the Catholic Church. So on Saturday Night Live, on live television, instead of the picture of the African child, she lifted up a picture of the then Pope, tore it, and said, "Fight the real enemy." And that's what that's in reference to. So, I mean,
do we think Rob Bartlett is clever enough? That might not be the right word, but do we really think he is drawing back to something like that, or is he just being Rob Bartlett?
No. I think it was a very blatant reference from 2 years before. No, because it had been
SNL New York. Okay, maybe you're
exactly.
right.
Yeah, there was a big connection with that, and I think that it was kind of fodder for a long time. I think that's quite interesting about where we're at as a society these days. Is that back in the day we had like a uniform culture where like everyone was watching like Friends or Seinfeld or the Super Bowl. Now like you get like pockets of it where I think once a year everyone watches Mania, once a year everyone watches the Super Bowl, and maybe like a Game of Thrones here and there. But Game everyone's watching other stuff right now.
Everything is a niche nowadays, I think. Everything is a niche. And it's not just a little niche where it can't thrive. Things are thriving within their niche. I mean, wrestling is arguably at its smallest in terms of the amount of people watching it, yet it's thriving. In terms of that it's not mainstream, but yet it's thriving simply because things are thriving within their niche nowadays. And it's interesting to how it's changed so much. Like you say, everyone was watching Friends in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think that's the era of Friends. Everyone was watching all these shows, like you say, and now times have changed. It's really
Yeah.
interesting, actually.
Well, then, so Rob Bartlett rips up this picture, and that is the first crime that we're going to see on this show. What happens afterwards, Ricky?
Then we get, I don't know if it's a debut, but it's the first time I'm seeing him on TV. We get Repo Man taking out Randy Savage and stealing his hat. Repo Man, the Repo Man. I know he was... Yeah. First of all, what is this gimmick? What is this gimmick? This is the epitome of 90s WWF gimmicks. This is if you want to explain what a 90s WWF gimmick, it's this. Take an occupation, turn it into a wrestling gimmick. That's literally what this is about.
I have a very long spiel about Repo Man coming up a bit later. Spoiler alert, but I have many thoughts. Is all I'll say on this matter.
Do you know who? You obviously know who Repo Man was, right?
Barry Darso. That would be Demolition Smash.
Yep. Such a fall from grace. Not saying they were fantastic, but they were on top of the tag division in the golden era, that's for sure. In WWF.
Well, to this day, they are the third longest rating tag champions in history. I think second is New Day and first is the Usos.
Well, there you have it then.
Yeah, well. Hey, you gotta be flexible in this game. I won't lie. Repo Man, he's one of those guys who I go back and forth on him constantly. Because I think that, if you're approaching it from like a puro wrestle, like Kenta Kobashi, like kind of vibe, then yeah, it's obviously terrible. But if you're somebody who has that kind of proclivity towards goofier stuff, I mean, this is gold. Like, this is absolute gold. Simon Miller talks about him all the time on YouTube.
He's his favorite wrestler. I would agree with you if we didn't get 10 other goofy characters. If we didn't see Doink the Clown later on in like a little flashback, if we didn't see, what is the guy that comes up in future episodes, Bastion or something, I don't know.
Oh God, Bastion Booger, we'll get to him, buddy.
If we didn't get all these characters, I'd be like, yeah, a little bit of goofiness is good. Look at R-Truth on Raw right now. It's a little bit of good. But
I'm kind of worried about him because the thing is, it's like R-Truth kind of started out as a bit goofy. And now it's like he's kind of giving relative with like a degenerative like brain disease like vibes. It's like, are you okay? Like, do you need help?
Basically doing the Eugene character but in a 2024 woke method. That's literally what they are doing.
And it's like uncomfortable in a different way. It's not uncomfortable like, oh God, why are they doing this? It's more like, can we check on him? Like, is he okay?
Yeah.
But anyway, so yes, we have the first act of hat larceny, and honestly, I'm so glad that it cut to the first match very quickly.
Yeah.
Because if this had been my opening shot after the clown and time, I think I'd be like, I don't know if I like wrestling anymore. I think I'm just gonna go outside and just be a human being now. But then basically we start out with the first match, and I've written here, Battle of the AWA Veterans. And quite an interesting story for the two of these. It's Mr. Perfect and Terrific Terry Taylor. And what you may not know is that these two were up for the same gimmick in the 80s. That basically Vince had this idea for the Mr. Perfect character, which is, a supreme athlete who's good at everything, which both of them are. Like, that's a shoot. They're both really good at it. But for whatever reason, they decided to go with Kurt Hennig. And our friend, Mr. Terry Taylor, got the Red Rooster, which, I mean, that's got to hurt. So it's quite interesting that, like, the two of them were both up for the same sort of gimmick. And here they are tussling in a match. And I got to tell you, I really, really enjoyed this. Like, I love the beginning of just Mr. Perfect just starting with these hard slaps, like this hard, proper, like, the best way I can describe it is like, for you rugby fans out there, like a loose flank who's just talking crap and slapping the scrum, the fly off. And like, he was just the proper, like, mean jock. And his sequences here were unbelievable. Like, I was checking out his throw Terry Taylor into the turnbuckle very stiffly, straight into a shoot hip toss. I don't know if you saw this. Like usually pro wrestling hip toss is you lock the arm, like you wait for the guy to run towards you, you lock the arm and you flip it. This was judo hip toss. This was like leg on, I'm hooking. It was hectic, and it was straight into a hip toss, straight into a headlock takeover, and then right into a drop kick. I thought, good Lord, this man has hit 5 moves, and it's been 30 seconds. It was, I mean, like obviously water is wet, the sky is blue. Mr. Perfect is good at wrestling. Yeah. But you watch it and you go, he was really good.
Look, I think at this point, Mr. Perfect was one of the top guys in the WWF for sure. He wasn't just an upper level mid-card guy. For me at this point, before he eventually leaves, he was one of the top guys. I think of him right now in the bracket with Brett, Rick, Razor. For me, he's in that bracket right now. And it shows, I mean, the way he worked in this match with Terry Taylor, I really, really enjoyed this match. I was just happy it wasn't a squash at all, because last week we just had squashes, and this week we didn't have any squashes. I was like, this is a complete contrast to last week. So yeah, great wrestling. The commentary team again felt a little bit uninterested in the match. Bobby Heenan came on commentary for a little bit, spoke his side of the story. Obviously, we know his history. He called in. Yeah. They just seemed a little bit uninterested, but I guess that's them. I mean, Randy Savage was talking about Repo Man the whole time and where's his hat, because now he can't find his hat, and that's the most important thing to him is his hat. My God. Yeah, and I think there was a lot of water maneuvers from Terry Taylor and Mr. Perfect. A lot of water maneuvers. Don't know what they are, but great maneuvers.
Someone needs to buy him like a book that just has, this is a takeover suplex, this is a dragon suplex. Just, he doesn't have to learn them all, but just like 1 or 2 moves. What I really enjoyed about this match is that it was a really good display of psychology in that what they had on paper was, okay, Mr. Perfect is the heel who's going to get booed, and Terry Taylor is the plucky baby face who gets slapped and is going to try and make a comeback. But it was very clear from about 2 minutes in, people were going ballistic for Mr. Perfect.
Oh, yeah, he was the face.
And what was quite nice is that Terry Taylor didn't do the whole, no, Mr. McMahon told me to do it like this, I'm going to stay steadfast. He started working a bit more heelishly. And Mr. Perfect kind of started being a bit more athletic as opposed to being more heelish. They did a perfect face and heel turn mid-match, using only their physicality. I was like, this is something that they should show in wrestling schools. Because there are going to be times where you come out and, the booker kind of tells you, all right, you're the bad guy, and you walk out and people cheer for you. You got to change everything. That's just how it is. Wrestling, it's a live sport. And I was just, as you said, I was just so happy. And I think I even wrote here in my notes, finally, wrestling. Not like what exactly this weird carnival show is that you're trying to put on.
For sure. And then eventually it all broke down when Flair attacked Mr. Perfect at ringside behind the ref's back. Ref was distracted. You know the spiel. He eventually throws him in. Terry Taylor tries to capitalize, but Mr. Perfect still lands the perfect plex and gets the win. In other words, he lands a water maneuver and gets the win on, Mr. McMahon actually called it a superplex. He couldn't be any more wrong. Couldn't be any more wrong.
What I really appreciated about that finishing sequence is that it showed how much of a logical performer Mr. Perfect was. Because the thing is, a lot of wrestlers, they have this thing where they act like textbook wrestlers, which I understand. But there's something so nice about performers, like you see it a lot with MJF, you see it a lot with Punk, you see it a lot with Swerve, where yes, they're wrestlers, but they're also human beings who think logically. And what I loved about it is that Ric Flair interferes in the match, but Mr. Perfect gets distracted because he's only human. But at the same time, there is a match. He counters a suplex into a perfect plex, which makes a perfect, if you'll pardon the pun, perfect sense to his character, which is, I am good at wrestling. He pins him, and the minute that the 3 count lands, he doesn't get up and cheer. He rolls out and he runs towards the back. He's like, okay, I'm I'm done with this. I'm finding you now. And I just thought, like, job done. Because now in my head, this is immediately a sports competition, in the sense of that if we were watching a rugby game and someone like from the Stormers jumped over during a Sharks game, like Sharks versus Cheetahs, and tackled like one of the Sharks players, yes, the Sharks player is going to finish the match, but as soon as it's over, he's finding that Stormers player.
Exactly.
Because this is it's a real life sport, which I really appreciate it. It's like small things like that kind of show you, oh, some performers are really paying attention to the fact that this is a simulated sports competition. Like, I appreciate that.
I agree. A little bit of logic goes a long way in wrestling sometimes. A long way.
Bingo.
Bingo. When they get attacked by someone and the guy hides under the ring and the crowd is all trying to tell him where he is, and then the wrestler just doesn't pay attention to that sort of stuff, and I'm like, my guy, they telling you where he is. That sort of stuff. Yeah, just listen. I'm specifically picking out that because recently Randy Orton actually did the opposite of that. I think it was before WrestleMania, when Logan Paul was hiding under the ring. The crowd basically told him, listen, he's under the ring. He went and found him under the ring. So he did the opposite. He was also logical about it, but it made sense.
Yeah, I think that it's been very nice to kind of see a lot of performers come out of their shell now that there isn't so much of a stringent placement on them.
Yeah.
In that, like, I'm sure like Paul Levesque is kind of going, dude, you're Randy Orton. Like, I trust you. You can do this.
Exactly.
But speaking of which, we can't talk about the lauded year of 2024. We got to go back to
it hasn't happened yet.
And all of that goodwill is, in my opinion, is immediately taken out, with hindsight, of course, when Vince McMahon ogles one of the ring girls going, hello. Like, it's so creepy now in hindsight. I'm like, oh, he's a criminal now. Like, this is
literally,
okay.
Is this what you were doing in 2024, just with a bit of more action behind the talk? And
that's why no one can say in some like tell-all documentary in a few years, like, oh, we just had no idea he was like this. Like, really?
Yeah. I've heard Jim Cornette say, this is not the Vince I knew. The Vince I knew in a suit was all professional. And I'm like, are you sure about that? Are you really sure about that, Jim? But anyway, Jim Cornette, he remembers what he wants to remember, but we'll leave it at that.
I'm fine with that, man.
Then we had Bret Hart. We had an interview with Bret Hart and Vince in the ring, where Bret got asked a question, and he basically responded with, when he can take all the hits when it comes to him, but when it comes to his family, that's where people step over the line. And of course, we're referring to Razor attacking Owen Hart. The previous week, we saw that footage where he attacked Owen Hart, and he also had some words for Stu Hart, who is obviously the father of Bret, Owen, and about everyone else. So that was a decent interview from Bret Hart. Sometimes I think Bret's promo skills aren't quite up there, but I had no problem with this at all. It was perfectly fine.
I'm actually glad that you said that, because I think that one of the big things that I've tried to do coming into this podcast is, unfortunately, with the wrestling community, there seems to be this hive mind that's been created where everyone seems to have the same opinions on everything. Like, people will always say like, oh, the worst thing to ever happen was the Montreal Screwjob, or like, oh, this person's the greatest wrestler, this person's the worst wrestler. And everyone starts, like, they don't do their own investigation anymore. They hear what people tell them on the internet, and they just believe that to be true. Now, I remember that there was a lot of flack that was given to Bret Hart in the early 90s of like, his promos were bad, and he was a good wrestler, but a bad promo. And watching this, I mean, look, it's not like Ric Flair, and it's not Dusty Rhodes, but in the same way that I complimented Mr. Perfect, I'm going to compliment Bret Hart here in that when you've got Repo Man with a Sly Cooper mask running around cackling, a literal clown beating someone up, there's something nice about a guy who is just a plain-spoken, tough Canadian talking about, don't say stuff about my dad.
Exactly.
And I mean, like, again, and I keep bringing it back to this because it's important. If you watch a sports press conference, like if you watch the Premier League, there are very few like football players who are like skilled orators who like the minute that they talk, you go, wow, this is captivating. A lot of the time you're kind of going, you are very good at playing football, but like, wow, you are boring me to tears with this.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's just how it is. And sometimes you can be good at something and not good at another thing. But at the same time, I think Brett was good here. I mean, he was a fiery babyface talking about, look, don't say stuff about my family.
Yep.
And yeah, Razor Ramon, you are a scumbag. I mean, I'm sold. I want to see that match. Yeah, there we go.
He says he's going to redeem his family at the Royal Rumble. I mean, who doesn't get behind that? Who doesn't get behind that? It's simple babyface stuff that he's going on here about. And look, like I said, I thought it was perfectly fine. I didn't see any problems with it. The audio was much better than last week with the interview with Razor. I think Vince figured out how to hold the microphone. But yeah, I mean, it enhanced the story, because last week I was a bit concerned that the WWE or WWF champion wasn't even on the show. This week I'm like, okay, we've been introduced. Say this is your first time watching, because now you've seen this new show called WWF Raw. Now introduced to the champion for the first time, and yeah, he definitely came across as a champion. You know, upright, professional guy who is just there to defend his family.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you think about it as well, like, as you said, you're a kid who's just tuning in for the first time. You've seen a stormer of a match with Mr. Perfect and Terry Taylor, and now you see the WWF champion, who's this, like, cool guy, slick black hair, leather jacket, big, I mean, the Winged Eagle title belt is still kind of, like, perfection. Yeah. You put that all together, it's like, you're cool.
Yeah,
I want to see, I want to see where this goes.
And then you see him wrestle, and it's even better.
It's even better, exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to say that the next pod wasn't cool, but it was very strange. Charity work is good. Okay, yeah. I'm putting that right on the table. Agreed. Charity work is good. Controversial opinion, but why? Out of all the performers you could have chosen for the headlock on Hunger Pro, why was it Paul Bearer and the Undertaker?
Yeah, doesn't add up.
Messages there.
Does not add up. It's like, I'm a dead man walking, but you need to eat your food. We need to get you some food. People are starving out there, but I'm a dead man walking. It doesn't add up. They don't link well. Yeah, the voice behind Paul Bearer scares the life out of me, and not in a good way, like, oh, that's spooky. It just sends shivers down my spine. And
because that's his job.
Exactly.
You know? I mean, I think that if you had to do a charity with like the Avengers, are you getting Chris Evans or are you getting Josh Brolin in Thanos makeup to do it? You're getting Chris Evans. You know, like I don't know. It was strange. It was very, very strange. Their ad section was quite interesting though. Bret Hart doing Ica Pro. I already think that looked kind of cool. It's very funny because in hindsight, in every interview he's given subsequently, he said like, "Oh, you couldn't pay me to take that stuff. Like, it wasn't very good at all." But, I mean, the advert was cool. Once again, they're putting over the fact Bret Hart is cool. He's in a gym that looks cool. Maybe if I take this Ica Pro, I will be cool too. It's stock standard advert. And then finally, I will never, ever get tired of Randy Savage telling me to step into a Slim Jim. Just simple and to the point, man. He is the man, dude.
Agreed. We then had a match between Marty Jannetty and Glenn Ruth. Now, I'll be honest, I do not know anything about Glenn Ruth. I'm not sure if you have any. Nope. Okay. I guess not.
Nope.
So...
Nice tights. This
match was clearly there just to enhance the story coming up this weekend, because we heard from Shawn Michaels' part. Now we're hearing from Marty Jannetty's part this week, even if it's just in match-based form. I think the first thing that I noticed when watching this match, and I've watched a lot of Marty Jannetty, but mainly as the Rockers with Shawn Michaels. But anyway, the first thing I think to myself is, this man could have gone places if it wasn't for his unreliability, his abuse, his drug abuse, unfortunately, and his inability to cope with that drugs. Because let's be honest, a lot of people were on drugs at the time, but they just coped better. Like Shawn Michaels, we know he was on a lot of pills. He was sniffing a lot of stuff, but he coped with it somehow, until it all broke down, but he coped with it. And yeah, he really could have gone places, man. He really could have gone places.
Yeah, and I think what's sad about watching this era, and there are a couple of these wrestling what ifs, where you kind of watch it and you think that there were these little splits where things just worked out for them, and then it comes tumbling down. Works out for them, it keeps tumbling down. Like anyone who knows me, who's spoken to me for more than like 10 minutes about wrestling, know that I have a huge love for Brian Pillman. And he's another one of those guys that you just look at and you think, man, you could have been the best. Yeah. You could have been like a world champion. And just unfortunately, like addiction is one of those diseases that it's stop, start, stop, start. But the starting becomes harder every time.
Yeah.
And the stopping becomes more violent every time. And I think that this is probably the best run that Marty Jannetty is going to go on in the WWF, which we'll see kind of come to a head later on. But I mean, I was just looking at some of the moves he was doing, like just the classic slide through the legs straight into a rocket dropper, the way that he would do, as AJ Styles would say, it's about the little things. Like the way that he feeds an Irish whip, the way that he does a leapfrog. He was a good-looking guy. Like, yeah, he had everything going for him. And I know that once again, it's water is wet, the sky is blue. Marty Jannetty is a missed opportunity. I know we're not giving anyone anything new, but I think that there's a difference between reading articles and like hearing Dark Side of the Ring interviews and then seeing it and going, oh damn, And I think what's even worse is how people kind of have this thing where it's almost a term of subjugation when someone says, "Oh, you're the Marty Jannetty of this team," which is really unfair because on one hand, anyone is going to like come second to Shawn Michaels. He's like categorically one of the greatest performers of all time.
Of course.
But Marty Jannetty, like he's pound for pound, like at this period, he's one of the best.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just life is unfortunately strange and unfair. And I now have no idea how we're going to do this, where we go from a very cogent, poignant point on the kind of infallibilities of life to the next segment, which is a flashback of superstars.
Yeah, so pretty much what happens is Doink and Crush there's a little bit of an altercation on Superstars, okay? Doink hands Crush a rose or a flower of some sort.
It's a daisy.
Crush is reluctant to take it, but he takes it for some reason, and he moves on with his life. Because we know Crush is not the smartest man. We've heard his promos. Then Doink takes off. His arm is in like a sling, firstly, before it gets to the point. Like a makeshift sling, nothing too, over the top. And he rips out this cast. It looks like a prosthetic arm of some sort because it's got the hand and everything. And he just batters Crush with this arm. And he takes Crush down. He batters him. The commentary team is acting like we'll never see Crush again. Like Doink has just killed him, to be honest. But that's one thing. Yeah, I don't know what to say. This is the first sign of Doink being like sinister and like real dark because it's actually attacked someone and not just being like goofy and like funny. But still terrible stuff.
Look, I won't lie. This was the first time that I kind of saw, because I obviously know that Matt Bourne was a very good competitor. I've seen some of his stuff in Portland. I've seen some of his stuff elsewhere. Like, if he had kept this, like this sort of Pennywise Joker, Pogo the Clown kind of a deal where he's an evil clown, okay, like, all right, let's see where this goes. Like, the kind of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm injured. Oh, let me give you a flower. Ha, psych, hitting you with it's like, okay. Like that I can watch. That's interesting.
Okay.
You take a look at like media, evil clowns. That's a way to print money. But party clown, I don't know. So it was compelling, and it kind of gave me this idea of, okay, you know what, Doink, I'm going to give you a second chance. I know where it leads, but remember, I'm trying to watch all of this with amnesia, and in my head, I'm kind of going, okay. okay, you have my attention, and it's in the middle of the show where it can't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
It's something that can develop to something else. So I guess we'll see where this goes. And, Randy Savage, you hang in there, brother. I'm pulling for you. It's just like, it just made me chuckle at the fact that Crush gets beaten up by a clown, which, you shouldn't get beaten up by a clown. That's sad. But it's like, Ready Randy, nothing for Owen Hart, who got beaten up by Razor Ramon. Like, where's his best wishes?
Yeah, there was nothing last week, but I think that does lead to a story later on. I don't know how long down the line is, but it does lead to something between Randy and Crush. Anyway, I think my problem with Doink is the way he looks, and then the way he acts. They're two different things. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If we had a little bit of a scarier looking Doink, like we know a local wrestler here, Gene the Clown. He has now an ulterior character, like a different character. I think he's changed it up completely.
Georgie,
Georgie, exactly. I actually watched him this weekend, by the way. He lost his title, but let's not get on to that. Yeah,
good lord.
Then it was just fit the character better. If he looked sinister, he looked scary, but he looks too friendly. And I get that is maybe the thing that they're trying to go for, this friendly clown, but he's actually not. But then you just need to add hints of he's not scary, just subtle hints of he's actually dark. Have him have this all playful outfits, and then just add something that's just like, okay, there's something up with this guy.
I'll tell you where I kind of really sort of liked the character was when he was let go from WWF. He showed up in ECW. And before the restraint of trade agreements came through from Titan, that basically said, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Matt Bourne kind of used the gimmick in a sort of relaxed way where he called it Born Again, which basically was, he was Doink the Clown, but it was like him kind of becoming more and more disheveled in the sense of that every match you'd go into, the paint would get like a little more runnier, the balding sort of hair would come out, it's starting to get a bit dirty. It's like that, for me, the minute that you start going into that sort of Krusty the Clown, Pennywise sort of look, now I'm interested, because when I think of clown, I don't think of, yay, a clown. I think, oh God, how many people have you eaten? I'm just...
Exactly.
That's the way I feel.
Exactly what I'm asking for. Just something that gives you the idea that this guy's he's not everything that he's playing out to be by giving you the flower. There's something behind him that tells you shouldn't trust him.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're asking for nuanced storytelling from 1993 WWF, which is kind of like asking for a salad at a fast food joint. It's like, you're not looking in the right place, but sorry. But my new favorite meme came out of this. I want to put it as just a screensaver, on a loop. Rob Bartlett just eating a Slim Jim and not caring about the rest of the show is that isn't.
That's a part of his character.
Mood.
Yeah.
But it's that's my mood on it's Friday at work, it's 4:35 and it's just man, I don't know, you're just eating a Slim Jim.
That's how I felt last week watching Raw.
Yeah, it's just pretty funny. And then we get on to, I don't know if this was my favorite section or my least favorite section, because honestly, I had to keep checking my coffee to see, did I take acid or something? What am I watching? Because this was something out of the Eric Andre show. It was Repo Man getting interviewed outside of New York with Macho Man's hat, and then Macho Man on the split screen, and they're kind of yelling at each other through the split screen with this frenetic 90s editing. And I thought I was losing my mind. I thought, is this actually happening? It was so funny.
Yeah. I was just thinking to myself, how has Randy Savage gone from, the likes of Randy versus Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 to Randy versus Hogan to the Mega Powers to Repo Man? How has this happened?
Ricky,
How have we got
Ricky,
here?
he was WWE champion
That
8
too.
months ago, and I gotta
Wait,
tell
was
you,
it that close? Like
it was
8 months?
8 months ago. I'm not kidding. And I think what makes this even worse is that he clearly needs to like have a chat with his accountant at that point, or his tax specialist, because I understand that like everybody knows once you get the belt, you get paid more. I'm sorry, like to anyone who thinks that wrestling is based on I want to hold the title because like it's prestigious. No, you're doing it because you get paid more when you're the champion.
Exactly.
And I think that he needs to like take a look at his spending habits, because he went from being WWE champion, probably making like half a bar every show.
Yeah.
Now he has to make installment payments on a pink hat. What is happening? Because that's the story.
Yeah.
Repo Man is repossessing his hat because Macho Man has not made payments on it. What is happening here?
What is the story? Where can you buy clothing? Okay, that was actually going to be really stupid because you can buy clothing on accounts. But where can you buy that type of clothing, like Randy Savage is wearing, and have to make monthly installments?
Look, it's New York City. If you can find anything hot, like if you're looking hard enough. But that's not my question. The hat salesman is not at fault here. Repo Man is just doing his job. Randy needs to have a sit down. He needs to ask himself, like, okay, I am the lead color commentator on like the highest viewed wrestling show on the planet. I was WWF champion 8 months ago. Why am I making payments on a hat? What's happening here? It's giving very MC Hammer vibes, you know, like I don't know.
Yeah. Look, he does wear a different outfit. He does wear a different outfit every week, so maybe it gets kind of costly, you know?
You wear a different outfit every week. We change clothes every week. That's how it works.
Do we wear that?
Don't make it.
We don't wear that type of clothing. Have you ever bought that type of clothing in your life?
If I could pull it off, I would. But I think it would be one of those deals where if I dress like that, I wouldn't look like Macho Man Randy Savage. I would look like a guy dressed as Macho Man Randy Savage.
So it's settled. Next week on the podcast for episode 3, Michael Lawrence Potter will be dressed as Macho Man Randy Savage. Done deal.
Oh yeah. I'm going to have to go into Tokyo, see if I can find an outfit. Thanks for putting me on blast there. But then we get... This was like one of the best gear changes ever, where we went from something that was very funny, but it wasn't cool by any stretch of the imagination. This was like you've just come out of a bar and like two hobos are fighting on like the outside. Like it was just like completely ridiculous. Then we get to one of my new favorite promos, because I'd heard about this promo, but I'd never seen it before. But seeing it is short, sharp, and to the point. Just Razor Ramon, purple background, gold jacket, gold chains, and he says, "You know me, Razor Ramon. Gold around my neck, gold on my ears, gold on my wrists, and after the Royal Rumble, gold around my waist, Chico." Flips the toothpick, and I'm just like, yes. And this sounds horrible, but in 1993, if I was watching this, as much as I love Brett being a stand-up family man, I'm rooting for Razor. I'm sorry. Razor,
for sure.
Razor needs to win this. Like for me, Razor Ramon at this time is giving me very Swerve Strickland vibes of 2023, where Swerve was doing like objectionably terrible things to Hangman Page, and everyone's like, yeah, but he's really cool.
Exactly.
We like him.
Yeah. Look, I think every time I watch Razor, I see more and more that he's actually a blatant ripoff of is it Scarface? Is that the movie?
Scarface, Al Pacino, Tony Montana.
Al Pacino. Such a ripoff, but do I care? No. Why? No. Because he pulls it off so damn well. That is the honest truth. He pulls it off. And I just couldn't care. I'm enjoying watching this guy in wrestling have a completely different character to anything we've ever seen in wrestling.
One of my favorite stories that I've ever heard is the fact that Al Pacino is legit a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
And Scott Hall bumped into him years later And he was expecting like, oh, here we go, I'm going to get some crap for it. And apparently Al Pacino, like, he called over one of his friends and said, you see this guy, he does Tony Montana better than I did. And I just thought
great.
That you must have like an outer body experience happening that like Scott Hall was like, I idolized you, man. Like, I watched all of your movies. He apparently watched Scarface like 100 times to get the mannerisms perfect. And it's so funny, like, if you watch, like, as it progresses, like, the accent's a bit shaky in the beginning, but, like, once he gets it. Yeah. To the point where, like, one of my favorite stories in the world was, this was during a time when kayfabe was quite strong. And it was only kind of the dorks like you and me who kind of knew the ins and outs of what was happening. Apparently, he was legitimately huge in like the Latin America, Latino community, because they saw him as like he's an Hispanic wrestler.
Yeah.
And here's the funniest part: even when like it came out that he wasn't, like, a lot of the Latin community were kind of like, okay, but it was such a good portrayal that they kind of just said, nah, honorary Latino, come in. Which ironically is exactly what happened to Al Pacino. Al Pacino's Italian. But like you like Scarface, he's Cuban, man, and it just shows that I think when it comes to wrestling characters, in my opinion, this is just my opinion.
Yeah,
there are two kinds of characters that work. You get characters like CM Punk, MJF, AJ Styles, who the old Jim Ross saying is, it's just them, turn up to 11. It's the same guy, turn up to 11. Or you have someone who is the complete opposite of what they are in real life.
Yeah.
You take a look at someone like, apparently Batista is incredibly shy. You'd never know it if you watched any of his promos. Kenta Kobashi is apparently the most gentle giant on the planet, but when he was in that ring with you, he would kill you. Like, I think that you either have to envelop yourself in the character like Scott Hall did with Razor, or you've got to be as honest as possible. And I think that Scott Hall as Razor Ramon is a perfect example of, you've got to dive into the deep end of the pool and just swim as much as you can.
Agreed. And then you get the likes of New Jack, who is literally himself 24/7.
R.I.P., baby. R.I.P.
Yeah, look, I enjoyed this promo just as much as you. Short, sweet, to the point, got his character out there. And yeah, Razor Ramon is just one of those guys that he really changed the game in terms of that character work, along with other guys, obviously. But yeah, I enjoyed him so much throughout these past 2 episodes. He's been the highlight for me.
What made me smile while I was watching this is I was going through some of the WCW house show results, and there wasn't much to like really report on, like nothing worth sort of bringing up on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that made me laugh was, about 3 or 4 nights prior to this taping, there was a guy by the name of Vinny Vegas who was going to compete in an arm wrestling competition with Tony Atlas. And it just made me smile of like, oh boy, in a few years, that Vinny Vegas guy is going to link up with Razor Ramon, and it's going to be too sweet. Can't wait, man.
Okay, well then we had a segment outside of the building, because for some reason they like going outside of the building. But Randy Savage is now looking for Repo Man, and he's literally running in between cars. He's just gone crazy. Vince is on commentary saying, get him out of the road, like he's going to die on the road there.
I was dying.
This is just chaotic. Randy Savage the man looks like he's lost his whole life here without this hat. Like,
yeah, like I'm just imagining, like, it's Monday. Rob Bartlett put, like, he's had a few good lines here and there. One of the lines that I really liked is when he said, you know what? It's New York City. No one's even going to bat an eye at his outfit, which is true. Like, but I'm just imagining, like, you're getting home from a New York commute. Like, my brother stays in New York, and like, you imagine that you get off the subway, you come up onto like 17th Avenue, you're walking down the street, and just Randy Savage running around going, "Where's my hat, man?" Like, it's like you just walk past. I don't have time for this, man.
Yeah, really.
No. I don't have time for this. No, it was excellent.
We do find out, I think we forgot to mention it earlier in the episode, that we will be seeing Randy Savage. It might have been here or it might have been earlier, but anyway, we're seeing Randy Savage versus Repo Man next week in a ladder match for the custody of his hat. So, well,
for crying out loud. But like, he even sounded surprised when it's like, at the end of the episode, Vince was like, we're going to see you against the Repo Man. And then Savage was even like, oh, is that confirmed? And I think he was kind of he was saying it in a way of like, really? We're doing this?
We're
okay,
actually...
you want me to do this? Okay. No, the custody of Repo, of the hat. I was listening to a podcast that they said that the thing about Randy Savage is that he's very much like a Nicolas Cage when it comes to acting, in that he's got 0 or 10. There's no in between.
Yeah.
And it's like quite funny to see, like, he's amazing and I love him, but it's so funny to see this intensity of him losing his hat. I was like, this is how he reacted when Jake the Snake Roberts put hands on his wife. Like, it's just kind of like wow, you really just react to things. Eh? You're just there emotionally.
Fun fact: Nicolas Cage is my most hated actor. Just a fun fact, just to put it
really?
out there. Yeah, because he screams too much, or he does nothing. Like you say.
Let me ask you a question. Have you seen the Weight of Insurmountable Talent yet?
If that's a movie, I probably avoided it.
Okay. We'll do this. If I have to dress up as Macho Man, and I'll do my very best. I've got very limited resources here. But if I try that, you have to watch The Weight of Insurmountable Talent, because that, I believe, is the movie that changed a lot of people's perceptions on Nicolas Cage, in the same way that a lot of people hated Adam Sandler, and then they watched Uncut Gems and thought, okay, this guy can cook. Like, this guy's good. So I want to report back. If you still hate him after that, fair enough.
Okay.
But I personally think that you're going to change your opinion on it. That's just my 2 cents.
I'll check it out. We'll have a report back for you next week. My opinion likely won't change. Then we moved on to Tito Santana taking on Ric Flair. And I just thought to myself, if this was 1985, if only it was 1985 and we got the young Tito versus Ric Flair. But we got a slightly older Tito. Though. Still a good match. But it wasn't 1985 Tito, who I thought was, really, really good match. I think Tito is a great foil for Ric Flair. You know, it kind of,
absolutely.
I was thinking, I know it's completely different. The matches can't be compared, but I was thinking Ricky Steamboat's Ric Flair, that foil. That
similar vibes.
Yeah,
similar vibes.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So yeah, that's really, really good match in the end. What did you think?
I've taken a lot of notes here. What's so interesting, we keep going back to ECW. And I keep thinking, like, El Matador, he was, hecorrect me if I'm wrong, he was one of the first Eastern Championship wrestling champions, wasn't he? Like, he's one of like the... Yeah, he's like a name that you never think about. But I'll confirm this and get back to you. But like, I remember I was doing a quiz the one day because I was bored, and I was doing like, can you name all the ECW champions? And I remember he was one that I forgot about. I thought like, oh, okay, interesting. But he's just one of those guys that, I mean, Tito Santana, he's one of those guys that if you speak to a wrestling fan, not a lot of people have a bad word to say about him, just because he's this cheery, plucky baby face, which was a shoot, which is true, and just absolutely so gifted in the ring. What I loved is Tito Santana did this sequence, which is basically just a way to show up-and-coming wrestlers how to use and maneuver a headlock. Like, I've written it here. He locks it into a gable grip. And then after that, he kind of does a headlock takeover, pushes off the turnbuckle, monkey flips, and then goes back into the headlock. And I thought, that's incredible. I mean, it's like, it's this idea of one move can be done in so many different ways. And he made it look as like smooth as silk. So I was very impressed with Tito Santana's kind of fundamentals here. Then, of course, Ric Flair was just in full Ric Flair mode, which I loved. Like, yeah, he was basically playing the hits in the sense that there was hard chops, that Flair bump that he does over the turnbuckle that makes me cringe every time I see it because it's so painful. His backdrops off of like a flapjack or off of off of a suplex. He gets so high into the end, comes down with a massive thud. There's an old joke with Ric Flair, and even though it's an old joke, it's still a funny joke. Because the minute he got on the top turnbuckle, you knew exactly what was coming. But you're still like, here we go. And I think back to him working the territories where, I mean, if you've ever gone off a top turnbuckle, you know, it's a bit painful. And can you imagine that now that's a spot that you have to do every single match that you do? Because it's funny, because every time he gets on the turnbuckle, he's coming off.
Yep.
Bam.
Every time.
Then he said one of the very few lines that Bartlett made me chuckle with, which is his "Help! I've fallen and I can't get up." You know, obviously referencing those old commercials from back in the 90s and 80s. I was like, okay, Bartlett, once again, you're 2 for 10,000, but that did make me chuckle.
I didn't find it funny, but I guess you gave context to it now, so maybe that's why I didn't quite find it funny. I thought he was kind of just mocking the wrestlers for not really, you should just be able to stand up. You're not really hurt. But I get it now. There was a bit of context behind it.
Oh, by the way, something that we need to reference, just because Bartlett's like slowly becoming white noise. Like I think in episode 1, I got so fired up by getting annoyed by him. But I think it was the combination of like the wrestling wasn't that interesting and Bartlett was annoying me. Whereas now in this one, the wrestling was so good. It was kind of like someone was next to me at a show, like saying annoying things, but I'm just like, I'm just watching. Like,
Agreed.
No, I was at a Stardom show about a month ago, and there was a guy that I sat next to who was awesome, but then there was another guy I sat next to who wasn't awesome. And I remember everything that the awesome guy said. I don't remember a thing that the other guy said because the wrestling was so good. Like I didn't have to. It's like I'm watching Emi Sakura. I don't have time to listen to this jabroni. But there was a line that Bartlett kept saying in the beginning of the show, and I had no idea where he was going with it, about his car. He basically said, "I've parked my car outside. Has anyone checked on my car? Is my car okay?" And he kept going on about it, and we'll get to it, but I'm so glad that it actually had a payoff. Because I thought, what are you doing? Like, what is this in service to?
So at times I did feel in this match that Flair was selling a bit too much. And I say that because we're building towards something that we'll find out soon, at the end of the match. And I just thought to myself, okay, Mr. Perfect looked very good in his first match. Yes, he sold. Yes, it was a competitive match, but it was exactly that, a competitive match. Mr. Perfect looked good. In this match, by the way this match went, Tito was just running over Flair at the end of this match. And it didn't end with Flair getting a win either. You know, that ended up being like, okay, cool. Flair ended up getting the win anyway, so what does that matter? No, it ended up with Mr. Perfect getting involved, and it all just breaking down, and we end up with basically a DQ. I don't know if it was a DQ win for Flair, or if it was a no contest. I don't know. They didn't really clarify.
I guess it's technically a DQ win for Flair.
Yeah.
But I think they would rule it as a no contest, because I know in WWE they have like weird rules that like Tito and Mr. Perfect aren't in cahoots with each other. You know, I think if they were like a tag partner or like a manager, it makes sense. But I think Tito would be like, no mas, dude. I don't know why this guy is here.
Who is this guy?
But we should have known that Flair was gonna like maybe not lose, but definitely not win, because Flair was wearing red. And if Flair's wearing red, he ain't winning. And like, I hate that I know that now. Like the minute that he walks out, I'm like, here we go. Like something's gonna happen here.
What happens when we see a match and that disproves that whole theory?
I mean, then but the thing is, it's one of those things where it's like Sex Panther from Anchorman. 90% of the time, it works 100% of the time, 60% of the time. Like, what?
I get exactly what you mean. Look,
but I really like the presentation of this after-match brawl, because it wasn't like a standard sort of sports entertainment. I'm gonna hit you, and you're gonna hit me, and I'm gonna hit you, and you're gonna hit me. It was like two guys, both from both trained by Vern Gagne, both hard-hitting guys, smacking the crap out of each other. One boy from Minnesota, one boy from North Carolina.
Yep.
You know, stalwarts of the NWA just beating the snot out of each other. And like they had people trying to keep them. And I mean, I think that was what was so nice about this show is that episode 1 was very Saturday morning cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
The second episode had elements of that. I mean, with Repo Man, but it was a lot more like this is a wrestling match. Like it was kind of a lot. It looked a lot. I mean, and Vince must have hated it, but it looked like territory wrestling. It looked like, you know, I can't remember who said it. I think it was Kevin Sullivan. Where Kevin Sullivan says that like wrestling almost has to apologize for itself because of how goofy it is inherently. Because it's two men in their underwear fighting. It's weird.
Exactly.
So you have to make it real right off the bat and make it uncomfortable and a bit strange in order for you to kind of go, well, is this real? Is this not real? Like, what's happening?
You got to blur the lines.
Bingo. And I think that there was some very good line blurring here. And especially after one of my favorite subgenres of promo is, you know, I love Jake the Snake kind of menacingly looking into the camera and telling you very slowly and very methodically what he's going to do. Love those promos. But I also really like Ric Flair as red as a white dude at a music festival without sunblock, just screaming his head off into the camera.
No one does it like him. No one does a post-match interview like Ric Flair. And I think the first one I think of is 92 Royal Rumble after he wins it. I mean, that's the iconic
with a tear in my eye.
That's the iconic post-match interview. But Flair, after a match where he's fired up and he just looks like he's been through hell, and like you say, red as can be, screaming, and you can still understand him. That's the thing. He's screaming in your face, but you understand exactly what he's saying. You know, some people, when they get over the top, you struggle to understand them, or they're not really coherent, or they're just rambling on now. But Flair is totally different.
He does a promo that is so good and so to the point where he's acting in a way that a frustrated. Oh, by the way, one note that I forgot to point out. Once again, creating that logic of storytelling, creating that logic of this is a real moving world of athletes who have histories with each other. Flair takes the time during his match with Tito Santana to lean over the ropes and call out Savage, like, I haven't forgotten about you, pal.
Yeah.
And it made me so happy because it's such a good attention to detail, but it also made me so sad because he interrupted Macho Man talking about Repo Man stealing his hat. And you can see in Savage's eyes, he's like, oh yeah, right. I used to fight against Ric Flair for the title at WrestleMania.
That's where I was, and this is where I am now.
This is where I'm at, baby. This is how it works. But Flair cuts this promo, and he does it in a way of like, he gives the old Western speech of, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. I am sick and tired of every time I look over my shoulder, you're there, and you're stealing my glory, and you're pissing me off. So you know what, cowboy? Let's shoot. You and me next week on Raw. Loser leaves the show.
Yeah.
And it was such good. It was exactly what that trifecta of what a good wrestling build should be. Two people who have a reason to fight, and there are real stakes that are going to. It's basically everyone wants to see Ric Flair wrestle. Everyone wants to see Mr. Perfect wrestle. They don't like each other, and it's not out of like some weird sports entertainment sort of thing. Not that those builds are bad, but it's out of like, I'm the best. No, I'm the best. I'm the best. No, I'm the best. Okay, you know what? Let's find out. Yeah. And if you want to know how seriously I'm taking this, I'm out of here if I lose. Which the minute that the promo ended, I was so happy while I was watching it because it was such a good delivery. And then I immediately felt so heartbroken because I realized, oh, you're not staying, are you?
Yeah, I was about to say.
And it takes me back to what I was chatting about in the beginning of the podcast, where leadership has changed in WCW. And Jim Herd is out, Kip Fry's in. And Flair kind of came to the WWF. Him and Vince have apparently always had a very good relationship.
Yeah.
And him coming into the WWF was not him like, I'm gonna stick it to the NWA, because Flair is the NWA. Like, if you had to think about,
you say
the
that,
NWA,
but he came with the title and he let Vince use the title. So
but hear me out on this. You know, if you think about the NWA's best players, you can't think about them without it being Ric Flair, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, and Sting. You know, those are like the four guys that you have to have. Without that, there is no WCW. There is no NWA. And I think Rick always wanted to go back there. But it was just kind of a thing of, I'm trying my best here, but they're wanting me to cut my hair. They're wanting me to be Spartacus. They're not giving the Midnight Express the title. They're burying Brian Pillman. You know, it's like all of these things that are kind of just not working in his favor. By the way, I think I'd stand to be corrected. I don't think it was Kip Fry was coming thing. I think it was Ole Anderson. Not Ole Anderson. It was Cowboy Bill Watts. Sorry, my mistake. Don't kill us.
It would have been Ole Anderson.
It was Cowboy Bill Watts.
Ole Anderson was the reason that the Midnight Express left and all of that. So yeah, it would have been.
Yeah. No, I think it was Cowboy Bill Watts. Sorry, don't murder us in the comments. My apologies. WCW was kind of a mess at the beginning, but but basically, I think he kind of saw where the wind was blowing, and Ric Flair, in his initial negotiations with Vince, essentially said, "Look, I'm Ric Flair. I left the last place because I'm not going to be a mid-carder," and I think he basically and then I think he got burnt out being the champion. He was nursing like one or two nagging injuries. And Vince was going towards the Yokozuna roots. He was going towards the, he knew that Yoko was going to be the person who was going to carry the belt for a while.
For sure.
Or Brett, they hadn't really decided that yet. And I think Rick was like, am I going to be the champion for the next year? Because I don't want to be, because I'm tired now. And Vince was like, nah, I think we're going to put it on Yoko. It's like, okay, so where do you see me in the future? And I'd be like, you'd be like number 3, number 4. And Rick was like, I don't know. Hey, I think Cowboy's back in the seat. I've got a lot more to give to WCW. I love you guys. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, because WWF rolled out the red carpet for him. He won the Royal Rumble. He won the title. He managed to get Undertaker a win of the title by cheating at this Tuesday in Texas. He got managed by Bobby freaking Heenan, and his secondary was like Mr. Perfect. Like, you can't get, I'm sorry, you can't get treated better than that. Like, they rolled it out for him. The only thing they didn't do him justice is that his WWF 93 theme was nowhere near as good as just the classic woo.
I thought you were going to talk about the fact that he didn't main event WrestleMania, but you went straight to themes. So I see where your priorities are in this, Michael.
I'm done arguing about that. It's one of those. No, the thing is it's one of those deals that it's the 90s and 80s. Hulk Hogan's going to be on top, and that's just the way it is, And I mean, I think anyone who watches WrestleMania 8 in hindsight, we all watch it for Randy and Rick.
Correct.
It's the same way as WrestleMania 13. Does anyone remember Sid versus Undertaker? Kind of, but we watch it because of Bret and Austin. There's certain WrestleManias where we know what the main event is, quote unquote, but everyone's watching the real quote unquote main event. Yeah. Just my 2 cents. Yeah.
So, when it comes to Flair's promo, and when he basically called Mr. Perfect out for a loser leaves the show match, I was thinking to myself, like you said earlier, this show felt very territory wrestling, old school.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what this match was, When it was your time to leave the territory, often what they would do, the story they would run is loser leaves town match, and then that's your time to leave this territory and move on. And I think that's exactly what they did here. That's literally what they did here. Loser leaves the show. And I liked it. It felt very old school wrestling, which obviously Vince absolutely hated, like you mentioned earlier. I'm sure this show is probably in his bottom of the barrel out of all the shows he's done, simply because it was a wrestling show. But yeah, and then Mr. Perfect came in, cut a decent promo, accepted the challenge as well.
Yeah.
And that set the stage for next week. Ric Flair versus Mr. Perfect. Loser leaves the show match. And I'm excited for that match. I've seen the match. I know what happens. We touched on what happens, unfortunately. But I think what's nice is somehow Vince let Ric Flair leave on good terms. He didn't bury him. He didn't have someone shaving his back, the revival. He didn't have any of that happening. He let him leave on good terms, which I am surprised about, honestly.
Yeah, look, I think that it was... look, I'm not even going to try and like get into the head of Vince McMahon because I think I need like a priest, a psychologist. And I'm okay. But I think that it was one of those deals where, you know, Ric Flair didn't ever really fit into the WWF. And that was the thing that made him work, is the fact that he was this kind of like representation of the NWA sort of invading the WWF, which like it works for a lot of characters. Like I think, you know, you think about someone like Kevin Nash and Scott Hall in the NWO. Their whole deal was, it's like, we're not part of this like Southern wrestling. Like we're New York boys. We're like we're the greatest examples that you can see is in New Japan, where like you look at someone like the Bullet Club, where, you know, Japanese wrestlers, very respectful, very honor based, very physical and technical. Bullet Club, we're all that, but we have bad attitudes, we cheat, and we're not from around these parts. Like the outsider gimmick like really works in those kinds of settings. But I think that because of that, you know, Vince kind of knew, all right, this is for a good time, not a long time. And the minute that the wind changes and, you know, Carolina comes a calling, he's going to bounce. And I think that, I think Flair had kind of run out of steam in terms of what he was going to be doing. Like he had already dropped the title to Brett. I think he could have had a very good series with Mr. Perfect. I mean, I would love to have seen him and Razor. That would have been interesting.
That would have been really
the problem
is,
but then like you'd have to turn one of them face, which is just such a waste of a character.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I think that and in hindsight, I think he left before things got weird. I think if Flair had, like, can you imagine if Flair had signed a 2-year extension and he was kicking around in 1995? I think he would have been very, very sad. Like, I imagine if he was like mixing it up with Doink or Repo Man, I think Arn Anderson would have stormed Titan with a gun, like, "You're coming home, Rick."
Definitely. He definitely got out in hindsight at the right point, you know. I mean, I think the Bastion Booger comes in one of the next episodes. Imagine Flair being around for that. You know, it's just not. It's below Flair, way below Flair.
Yeah. And then the show goes off the air with with the angle actually paying off of Bartlett's car, because the final shot is Repo Man.
Yep.
Towing Bartlett's car, which did pop me. I won't lie. I was like, okay, you got me. Like, that's pretty funny.
It popped me to see Bartlett suffering. It really did. He's made us suffer enough. It really popped me to see his car just dwindling away, kind of like our happiness in episode 1. So,
I kind of good point, but I kind of have to believe that Repo Man got Bartlett's car. Once again, what is happening with the financial management in this country? Company is Vince bouncing checks, because Savage is losing a hat and Bartlett's losing his whole car. Like, what? Like, you're a New York comedian. You had a good. You're like, you're a film star. Like, can you not afford to buy a car?
I think the steroid scandal had a bigger impact than we might have thought. That's all I'm saying.
Must have, man.
The financial times of WWF in 1993 were not so good, and it's clearly showing. Are you still there?
Are you there? Oh, are you back?
Yeah, I think it's me. Yeah, my connection is dropping.
Hello.
Oh,
you're back. Perfect.
Yeah,
that's one for the edits. But I like to believe that Repo Man came back for Bartlett's car, because I mean, this is all in kayfabe, but I imagine like Repo Man showing up back at his office, like, you know, chats to his boss Cindy, like, "Cindy, I'm back with Macho Man's hat. And Cindy's like, no. I sent you out the whole day. And that's the quota that you made. You're going to have to get something big or you fired. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to go back and get Bartlett's car. That's in my head.
Know how much that hat costs. Little does she know.
I think Cindy's checked out at this point. Like, she's obviously not hiring. Like, can you imagine? Like, I've done work for collections departments when I was working as an attorney. Like, if a dude looking like Repo Man showed up at my office, I would be like, you know what? I will find another job like this.
I'm packing up. I'm leaving.
Or I would say, is there another outfit and can I join in? Because at that point, I've just run out of F's to give. Like, you know what? This is who I am now.
So,
but
overall,
you know what?
The show was good. I enjoyed it. It was more wrestling based. The matches were good. Only 3 matches compared to, I think we had 4 or 5 matches last week.
Sure, yeah.
Which obviously allowed for more wrestling and more storytelling and more nuance. So I really enjoyed the show, and I hope it stays the same, but I know it's not going to. I just know. And that is real disappointing. So let's enjoy this moment and let's enjoy episode 2 of Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I mean, you can even take a look at the card, and you think you've got Ric Flair, Mr. Perfect, Terry Taylor, Marty Jannetty, Razor Ramon. Like, I mean, you start Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah.
Now, were they utilized in the greatest capacity? Some of them, absolutely. Others, but they were there, and it kind of makes you, as you said, it's a very different response to how we were in episode 1. Because the end of this, it's like, I gotta tune in. I gotta see what happens with this Flair and Mr. Perfect match. Whereas episode 1 was kind of like, okay, like why? What? Like, what are we watching?
What happened here? Yeah. What is there to look forward to next week? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. No, it was a good show, and I'm psyched for next week. And more of this, please.
We have the Royal Rumble first before next week's episode.
Yes, we do.
Forget that.
Yes, we.
So, with that being said, next week's episode will probably be a Royal Rumble episode of the podcast, which it's going to be a different vibe because obviously it's going to be very match based, rather than talking about stories, talking about Repo Man. But I'm excited for that. Our first pay-per-view on the show, on the podcast. I'm excited for it. The 93 Rumble, I don't remember much about it, to be honest, except for Yoko winning, I think he does. Spoiler alert. Sorry, my bad.
Pinfalls don't count. That's all I'll say.
So, yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too. And I think those of you who are following the channel, because it's a pay-per-view week, I'm going to cook up some little surprises for y'all. And I think we're going to make it a little more fun, a little more interactive. But yeah, the Rumble, it's always my favorite pay-per-view. WrestleMania's hit and miss. Rumbles, I think barring like 2015 and 2021, like they're usually really good. And I think that even like Royal Rumbles are kind of like pizza. Even bad Rumbles are still good because they're Rumbles.
Yeah.
And agreed. I think that 93 Rumble is actually going to be pretty solid just because of, you take a look at the... when Mean Gene was giving his synopsis of all of the competitors that were in it, like there's a couple of like names there. Like, I mean, I've already spoken about Tenryu's going to be there, Ted DiBiase, Repo Man's been added now, which I was just like, oh joy. That
just sounds great. Look,
fun.
It's no 92 Rumble. We know that. I mean, the 92 Rumble we know is just absolutely stacked to the brim. Yeah, but I think it's still going to have a lot of big names. I mean, Undertaker, IRS, Yokozuna, Perfect, Flair, Ted DiBiase. So there's some big names.
93 is such a weird time because it is like you have these seminal household names, like these talents, like a Ric Flair, like a Ted DiBiase, Undertaker. And then it's like in between, like the Berserker, Repo Man. You're like, oh, okay. Like,
the Brooklyn Brawler.
Hey, Steve Lombardi's a G, man. I'm not gonna hear any slander against him.
So
but cool. I think that's
Go for it.
You know it.
I was saying, with that being said, that is episode 2 of the STOMP Wrestling Rewind, the classic Raw Rewind, and I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys listening enjoyed it. Soon we're gonna veer away from WWF. So let us know down below. I know I asked this last week, but I'm going to ask it again just so we have a whole list to go by and see what you guys want to see. What else should we cover besides Raw in 1993 or WWF in general? Do you want us to go to All Japan Pro Wrestling? Do you want us to go to New Japan stuff? Maybe some TNA? Whatever it is, let us know down below what you want us to cover for one episode.
And nothing's off the table, guys. So as much as it would be nice for us to watch like a really good like old school WWF pay-per-view or like a Kings Road Japan classic, if you want to see us suffer through something horrible, like if you want us to watch like, I don't know, Juggalo Championship Wrestling or something terrible like that, throw it in there, man. Like I good wrestling's good, but bad wrestling is delightful. So I'm counting.
You know what I would like to explore at one point? I'm not sure what your knowledge on it is, but I would like to explore the world of sport side of pro wrestling. The old UK
Big Daddy.
Yeah. But, no, but not him. More like what was his name? Rocco. I think that was his name.
What's it?
Rollerball
Rocco. Yeah. He was
Dynamite
good,
Kid when he was there. Those types of guys, not Big Daddy Haystacks and whatever those other guys. I think
Organ.
Yeah, I don't want to see that. But I do want to see. I maybe dive into that at one stage because I think there's some really funny stuff in there and some really good wrestling as well. But we'll get maybe down the line.
Get there when we get there.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As always, you can check us out on YouTube or Spotify, whichever place suits you best. I'm WrestleDrop. You can check me out at WrestleDrop on more platforms or at Stomp Wrestling. You would already be on Stomp Wrestling if you watch this. But Michael, where can they find you?
Well, don't find me. I'm trying to hide away from you. But no, Michael Lawrence Potter at What's Potting. That's WHATSPOTTING on Instagram. And yeah, come through to see some pictures of me just kind of chilling around Japan and some spicy wrestling takes here and there. Thank you for listening. We'll see you at the next episode.
Take care, guys.